Railway goes down under and takes the train in Australia. This immense continent has much to offer its visitors. Not only do we see fascinating natural wonders, we also travel in several very special trains. During the 4,000-mile journey, the trail leads us through mountains and deserts and offers the most extraordinary views. It's an ultimate ride for train lovers. The Indian Pacific Railroad rides from the East Coast to the West Coast. Our starting point is Sydney. The world-famous Opera House and Harbour Bridge in the background are recognizably Sydney, Australia's biggest and oldest city, and according to its inhabitants, also the most beautiful. There is a subtropical climate all year round that provides a temperature for plants, animals, and people to thrive in. Since the British conqueror Captain Cook dropped anchor in this harbor more than 200 years ago, Sydney has developed into a sizable metropolis. The old centre is called The Rocks. In here, there's still many stately colonial houses to be found between the modern buildings. The best way to discover Sydney is by monorail. High above traffic, passengers glide over the city. It's a wonderful sight. The monorail lies in a circle around the city center. A highlight of the trip with the flying train is the passage over Paramount Bridge in Darling Harbour. The trail of the futuristic-looking monorail is about 15 kilometers long and passes 7 stations. We get out close to Harbour Bridge. The bridge, which dates back to 1932, is also called the Coat Hanger because of its form. At a distance of a few hundred meters lies the Opera House with its remarkable roofs, representing the swelling sails of the ships that have journeyed past this point for centuries. In the neighboring Blue Mountains, we get on the train to make a very special descent with the Scenic Railway, the world's steepest train route. The Scenic Railway dates from 1880 and was built for rigging coal. Hanging from cables with a counterweight, passengers descend along the sides of the Blue Mountains. Barely recovered from the steep descent, we get off the Scenic Railway and onto the Scenic Skyway. We glide between the Blue Mountains at a mere 275 meters above the ground. They call these 3 rock peaks the Three Sisters. Towering above the clouds, they look very impressive. The Scenic Skyway has brought us to one of the peaks of the Blue Mountains. We descend with the Zigzag Railway, a very unusual train. Halfway during the last century, the Zigzag Railway provided the connection between the town Clarence at the top and Lithgow in the valley. The construction has been a true work of art. Along steep mountainsides, the zigzag goes down 210 meters over a length of 5 kilometers. The The zigzag was first used in 1869. Upon the arrival of a more modern and faster train at the other side of the valley, they stopped using the little railway in 1910. For more than 60 years, the rails were not used. During the 70s, however, a group of enthusiastic railway lovers took it upon themselves to restore it. And after 5 years of hard labor, the zigzag could start on her daily descent again. Halfway down, we have passed the steepest part, and the locomotive is uncoupled and turned around. This way, the train can go down faster. The locomotive and carriages look bright and shiny, as the employees of the Zigzag Railway Company look after them with great care. Once it is turned, the locomotive speeds up to continue its journey. At hardly a meter's distance, we slide alongside the Blue Mountains rocks. At some points, the railway splits so other trains can pass by. The Zigzag Railway passes 2 tunnels and 3 bridges. After the railway was closed down in 1910, the sandstone bridges had fallen into total decay, but recently they were completely restored. Half an hour after our departure, the Zigzag arrives in Lithgow, and this fantastic trip comes to an end. Lithgow is situated in the middle of the Blue Mountains. The warm climate and tranquil woody surroundings draw visitors of all sorts. Tourists mostly come to this area because it is near the Jenolan Caves. This little mountain lake, together with a small river, make up the roof of several beautiful caves. In these caves, visitors can find thousands of stalactites hanging from the roof and as many stalagmites on the floor. It is a fascinating sight. Although these caves are thousands of years old, it was not until 1838 that they were discovered by chance by James McEwen. This colonist was searching for the thief that had broken into his farm. McEwen followed the burglar's trail and discovered that it was hiding in the caves. Ever since, many tourists have come to admire this awesome natural phenomenon. The water that seeps through the rocks contains small pieces of limestone. This limestone gradually piles up until it finally crystallizes. Mixed with pieces of iron, the rock formations show the most wonderful colors. All of this is a process of tens of thousands of years. Back in the open air, we've arrived at Sydney's Central Station. It is 10 to 2, and in about an hour we'll set off for what should become a great journey. We board the Indian Pacific, a train that rides right through Australia and connects the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. Full of expectation, the hundreds of passengers get on board. Among them, there are many Australians, for whom the journey with the Indian Pacific is the only way to explore their own vast country. The locomotive CLP-15 is about to start its journey that will eventually end after 3 days and 4,352 kilometers. We leave the beautiful city of Sydney behind us and travel west. Our first stop will be in Broken Hill, after only about 1,200 kilometers. We travel through the state of New South Wales, one of the most fertile provinces in the country. The British colonists saw this hinterland as a reason to stay here. Not only did almost every kind of crop grow in this fertile soil, but the ground also appeared to be full of oil. The Indian Pacific is a traveling town of its own. On the train, people can eat, sleep, even dance. The passengers lack in nothing. While the train travels through the stretched-out country, there's plenty of time to drink something at the bar. It seems only natural to use the train as a means of transportation in an expansive country such as Australia. Yet it took a long time before they connected the country's east and west coast. For 100 years, the various states used railway lines of different sizes. Naturally, this did not enhance a quick connection. For years, all kinds of government authorities bickered about the width of the railway. It was not until 1969 that they agreed on a uniform width, and in 1970, the first direct connection between Sydney and Perth could be made. The Indian Pacific is underway for 2 days and 3 nights. During the entire journey, the train has to be self-sufficient. This means that besides the dining cars and sleeping cars, there are also carriages for the staff, supplies, baggage, and other things. All in all, it is a ribbon of a few hundred meters that rumbles through the country. It is still early in the morning as the Broken Hill station comes in sight. This is where the Indian Pacific makes its stop. Broken Hill is a mine workers' town. For more than a century, they've been digging for silver and iron ore. Around 1900, it was a wealthy town, and many buildings from that time still proudly stand there. They seem to have been made completely out of wood. However, a striking amount of iron has been used to make them. It is not surprising that iron was cheap there, and that is why many porches and the roofs of many houses in Broken Hill consists of metal. It goes without saying that this is a much more modern use of metal. It was made by one of the many artists that have settled near Broken Hill. They're part of a group which is famous all over Australia and calls itself the Brushmen of the Bush. The painters, sculptors, and metal workers have a permanent exhibition in the deserted village of Silverton near Broken Hill. Here the painter, Shane Gellert, is at work. His paintings are sold all over Australia. Gellert's studio is situated in an unusual place. It is Silverton's former church. Services used to be held here for the town's mine workers. On the outskirts of Silverton, we see in a tree one of Australia's most famous animals, the koala. These herbivores spend most of their daytime sleeping. They do not become lively until the evening when they start looking for food. The koala loves to sit in the eucalyptus trees, of which there are plenty around here. There are so many of them, they've been brought about in an industry which makes eucalyptus oil. This oil is gained from the leaf of the narrow-leaf mallee. According to the manufacturers, this is where the best eucalyptus oil in the world is made. The oil is traditionally made. The leaves are put in a big kettle which lies partially under the ground. Under the kettle, a fire is made and the leaves are cooked in some water. The oil evaporates and goes out through a pipe system. Eucalyptus oil can be used for all kinds of domestic purposes, from scrubbing floors to disinfecting wounds. There is another special place near Broken Hill that is of national fame. It's a garden of sculptures at a few kilometers distance from the town. In here, there are 12 huge sculptures made out of boulders that arose when the silver mines were built. It took a group of international artists over a year to first place and then sculpt the immense rock formations. We leave the region of Broken Hill when the sun sets. We get on the Indian Pacific and continue our journey to Adelaide. Australia's best-known animals say goodbye to us. We're now riding in the state of South Australia. The 500-kilometer journey to Adelaide mostly takes us through a desert-like area. It's wide, barren, and most of all, hot. The Indian Pacific has completed its journey to Adelaide in no time. The train arrives at the railway station at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The first thing one notices about Adelaide is the amount of green which is here. The city was founded by the English Colonel Light, and he had numerous parks laid out. Adelaide is a city where beautiful Victorian buildings alternate with modern offices. This is the atmosphere of a modern-day metropolis, without life being very hurried. The 1 million inhabitants lead the relaxed lifestyle so typical for Australia. We soon leave Adelaide for an excursion to a lovely piece of unspoiled nature. We travel by boat to Kangaroo Island. We're immediately welcomed by a considerable colony of seals. It's no surprise this is called the Bay of Seals. Kangaroo Island is truly a paradise for thousands of animal species. It really is one big nature preserve. The sea, which is abounding in fish and protective dunes, make for an ideal home and breeding place for the seals. They're used to visitors and are not scared by anyone. A large part of Kangaroo Island is protected territory. The pearl white beaches and blue sea would invite project developers to build seaside resorts, but this is and will forever be the animals' domain. Naturally, we can also find the thousands of animals here after which the island was named. Kangaroos freely walk around on the entire island. These plant-eating marsupials have nothing to fear out here. Kangaroo Island has many lakes. Countless exquisite birds use these lakes as their drinking places. This is the Little Sahara, a huge sandy plain where usually a stiff wind is blowing. This wind drives up the sand, and this is how a new landscape is created every time. Kangaroo Island's capital is Kings Coast on the island's east coast. Capital is rather a large word for a town that only consists of a few streets. The locals mainly live on tourism. You can buy shoes of kangaroo leather here, for instance. According to the island's residents, they're the best money can buy. With this swan couple, we say goodbye to beautiful Kangaroo Island and come to the end of this episode of Rail Away. Next time, we continue our fantastic journey through the vast country of Australia. We take the Indian Pacific to ride another 3,000 kilometers to Perth. Among other things, the train takes us across the longest, straightest railway line in the world. Be sure not to miss the second part of this enormous journey.